Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to bring you another episode of Learning with My Rabbi, some of the teachers that have helped to make me the rabbi I am today. And today is a true pleasure. Rabbi Joe Menashe, Executive Director of Camp Ramah in California. Thank you so much, Rabbi. It's great to have you with us tonight.
My pleasure. Not so used to calling you Rabbi Sachs, usually when you've been working on the ropes course here at Camp Ramah in California, even as a rabbinical student and as a newly ordained rabbi, you are still known lovingly as Louis by all of the campers and staff here. But whatever we call you, it's a pleasure to see you. And we miss you here.
Thank you. I miss you guys too. It was always such a treat getting to step back from the overt Judaics and to be on the ropes course and to show Judaism in a more regular experience.
Right. I think that's our holistic goal from camp and the shul side, is that Judaism's not just when we're eating kosher and saying brachot and davening tefillot, but when we're in every other aspect of our life as well.
Great. So before we kind of dive into some of the more pressing questions of the time, I want to just back up a little bit. I know Jewish summer camp for me was such a tremendous influence in my own life and where I am today. So I just would love to hear from you a little bit about why you think Jewish camping is so important and what it brings to the Jewish landscape.
Sure. I think I wish I could say it's about me. I wish I could say that it's the director and rabbi who ends up having this significant influence. I think that there are three main components that make Jewish camping so successful. One, Judaism equals joy. It is just infused with this euphoric joy that we have a hard time replicating outside the confines of summer camp. Two, it's who the dugmaot ishi are. It's who the exemplars are. That for the chanichim, the campers, they look up to their 18, 19, 20-year-old staff members with awe and the influence, almost always for good and not always, to be totally honest, the influence that these madrichim, these counselors can have on young kids and the future of their Jewish journey is incomparable in other avenues, venues, institutions in Jewish life. So we try and give those young madrichim the tools, the inspiration, the guidance, but they're the ones that are kind of positing that thesis that Judaism is delicious and joyous and worth it. And then the third piece is these are leadership factories. Unless you go into an army at 18, 19, 20, in today's day and age, for the most part, 18, 19, 20-year-olds are not taking on significant real leadership roles in the world. And here at camp, they're parenting 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. They are, the pseudo rabbis for 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. They're learning how to work on teams. They're having to work in very difficult closed quarters. And what we end up seeing is over the course of someone's adult life, so frequently leaders in the Jewish community are bogrei, they're graduates of Jewish summer camps. And we as a community benefit from that. And so our tagline at Camp Ramah in California is that this is a journey for a lifetime. And we believe it, that you're going to not just make your best friends that are going to dance with you at weddings and comfort you at sad times, but you're also going to see them across boardroom tables and across the shul. And whether you end up staying in the denomination or not, you become a secular Zionist or Haredi or a Reform rabbi or a Farbrengen conservative Jew, the fact is that we create serious, intentional Jews as adults, and so many of them become leaders.
So given just the incredible impact that Ramah camp in general has on Jews and Jewish kids and young adults, it must have been a terribly tough decision to decide that camp could not happen this summer. Can you give us a little bit of background of what went into making that decision?
Sure. So ultimately, I think like for the camps, frankly, in the province of Ontario, it ended up not being our decision. We had said to our families over the course of a couple months that we had two paradigms. First is if we're permitted to do it, and then secondly, should we do it? And then, the should that's where it becomes our decision in terms of, can we do it in a way that reflects our values, that's a sufficiently authentic camp experience, that we can, manage it operationally and financially, that we can reasonably ensure health and safety, or responsibly ensure health and safety for our community, our staff, for our kids' families after they go back home. But we never got past the if. And ultimately for us, it was not so long ago that it became clear between the state and the county and various entities. It wasn't quite as swift and clear as the answer that the camps in Ontario got, but we were similarly told that the if wasn't going to happen for this summer. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world ahead. We run the year-round conference center because this is Southern California. Our camp is used every weekend, except for maybe 2 now, throughout the entire year and many weekdays. And obviously that has a financial impact on our camp as well, but it's going to impact the community because we don't yet know when we will be able to operate.
Are you able to go into a little bit about that? What is the impact you see, and not just on Ramah, but on Jewish camps in general, with so many being forced to close down for the summer, for year-round programming? Are we going to see big changes, you think, in the landscape?
I will say that Jewish camps are in it together. We care about each other. It's a beautiful example in the Jewish world of how we can all not just play nicely in the sandbox, but really, see each other as brothers and sisters and cousins. And so, in the Jewish camping world, we know the other directors, and we know them well. The Reform directors, the Orthodox directors, the secular Zionist directors, we really deeply care about each other. I think for each camp, it's going to be different in each camping movement, how they navigate this. A loss of a summer for most camps is a loss of 80 or 90% of their revenue for the year. For us, we're losing 90% of our revenue between the conference center and summer. There is some natural savings that comes along with that, but that creates a real difficulty in between cuts, financing, and fundraising. Most camps will get through this. Camp Ramah in California will get through this. We still have a good gap to get through, but we will get through this. And I do think that there will be some camps that don't have the kind of history or committed community that we have. And I think there will be some summer camps that end up closing or merging as a result. And Louis, we're talking here, on June 3rd. It's not, we don't know where the puck is going. Since I'm speaking to Canadians and using a Wayne Gretzky metaphor, we don't know where the puck is going on this. And so how long will this continue? What will summer 2021 look like? Will we be permitted to operate normally, get normal revenue, fill a camp? Or are we going to be limited to, only bottom bunks and bunk beds, and we can have half the number of kids? That will also have an impact and challenge the kind of viability of some summer camps.
It's definitely one of the major problems right now is no one has that crystal ball. We have no idea how long this will last. Looking towards the future, though, are there ways that we can support the camps that we love and that have impacted us so much besides just the obvious of financial donations? Is there anything else we can be doing to help spread the love and help support those institutions?
A lot of people have asked that. And I will say that in and of itself, just being asked that question, and I'm sure you've felt this as rabbi in the shul as well, that in and of itself buoys us professionals that are working in these roles and buoys the institutions. And so I would say reach out, certainly send a check if you're in a position to do so. If you have a grandchild, tell your kids that you'll, if you can, contribute to their camp tuition for next summer. Because lots of people are going through real financial challenges and uncertainty. And I think the most important financial piece for camp, as much as we need to traverse a multi-million-dollar shortfall right now, we need a full camp. And so, donate to your favorite camp scholarship fund for next summer. Help a grandchild go to camp. Or if you have some expertise, in marketing or finance or something, reach out to the camp. There's certainly opportunity to get involved.
That's great. What about for kids themselves? I know for me, one summer I had to miss camp as a child. I had to go to summer school. Algebra didn't go very well for me that year, and it was devastating. And I'm thinking back to it of if I would have missed one of those years, like my CIT summer or the program in Israel, a year that really can't just be made up as another year at camp. Has any thought been given to those types of programs? What might be done for those kids and those opportunities?
We're very concerned about kids, losing their journey at this time. It could be the first time camper that the family finally mustered up enough money to get the kid to come, and the kid got over the fear of coming for the first time. We're concerned about the final year camper, and they're missing that culminating pinnacle, emotional high, the memories that come along without the foundation for the rest of your adult Jewish life that's built that summer. I know it sounds like hyperbole, but it's really true. So much of the Jewish decisions that young adults make when they move away from home and go to college and then move somewhere in their 20s, often away from home, it has to do with some of these core camp experiences and the connections that are made at camp. And so we're thinking creatively, for what that means during the year, how we can have meaningful touch points during the year to bring them to camp or to bring them together elsewhere if COVID and the world permits, as well as creatively for next summer. Kids that lost their final camper year, their first staff year, their summer in Israel. That connection to Israel is so critical and so significant, as they're building their Jewish identity, and how we ensure that they still get some of that experience and continue the journey is critically important. But I will just be honest that on June 3rd, we don't have the answers yet.
Absolutely. So going back a little more broadly beyond the present situation, you've been now a Hillel rabbi, a rabbi at a pulpit at a synagogue, and now you are the rabbi at a summer camp. What brought you to Jewish camping? What made you decide this was what you wanted to do with your rabbinate?
First of all, I love Jews. I love Judaism. And I've loved each of those opportunities. Being a Hillel Director and the dynamism on a college campus with that diversity was really a foundational professional experience for me. Being a shul rabbi, I loved. I like you, was a second. I was an associate rabbi at a big synagogue in Texas. And I love the opportunity to teach and work with families. And while I'm the one that does the fundraising and board stuff now, I was happy to leave that to someone else at the time and just play rabbi, lots of hours. And it was very beautiful, satisfying work. And now this would have been my 10th summer as the director, executive director here at Camp Ramah in California. And I taught more Torah as a shul rabbi in terms of cracking text and teaching throughout the week. I think had I stayed in the shul world, I probably would be making more money than I'm making now as a camp director. But I don't think that there's anything else I'll do in my career that has more of an impact on the Jewish world and the world around us than being a Ramah director. This place, molds. We're not the only factor, right? There are day school and families and shuls and their U.S. SWAT, and there's so many other pieces that contribute. But this is where kids learn to call it their own and learn to love it and say, this isn't just my parents or my rabbis, this is mine. And that has sticky power. And I'm honored to be in this role as long as it works for me and works for the community here, because this community is shaping for good the future of the Jewish world.
One of the things that I imagine at times can be a little tough is that Ramah, while it's a conservative institution, it's like you said, it's made up of different synagogues, and people send their kids there from across the spectrum. You get people that are Shomer Shabbat, Shomer Kashrut, all sorts of things. Have you ever had to struggle with that type of balance of a community that really represents a very diverse group of conservative Jews, and balancing those different acts and levels to create a unified community?
Sure. I mean, I think in some ways, well, Ramah and summer camps love to create this, impermeable bubble, right, of the camp, and then at the same time, we're still part of the world around us. And so, in a world where polarization is sadly, where everything feels or is perceived as political, sadly, it then makes there to be unhealthy tension sometimes around religious matters that are perceived as political, or political matters that are perceived as religious. And so our tradition has always believed in disagreement. Machloket l'shem shamayim, that sense of there being sacred dialogue and disagreement, is the foundation of our rabbinic tradition. And yet we have a hard time doing that in a healthy way in the modern world. And so you can take any of the issues of the day. When the United States Supreme Court during the summer came out in favor of gay marriage, there were a lot of people in among our younger summer staff that obviously they're aware of what's going on in the world around. This, for some of them, this validates their very identity. And many of them were excited, supportive allies, and they started to go talk to their 8, 9, and 10-year-olds about this Supreme Court decision. And it was a real point of tension because, well, for a certain age that's appropriate to discuss with, and for our staff to be able to celebrate those that wanted to celebrate that, we wanted to provide them the space and opportunity to do so. Yet we were the parents of these 8, 9, and 10-year-olds whose own parents may never have spoken about these issues. They might not have understanding. They might not be in, or may have different perspectives, and we have to be sensitive to that, and yet try and stand for something. And so this comes up time and time again. And here we are in the midst of a time of tremendous complexity and turmoil, certainly in the United States. And people will, even without camp going on, turn to me and turn to camp and want us to be on the front lines of fighting for equity and racial justice. And then there are others that might find that as not the right place for Ramah to be at this time, as a Jewish summer camp. And so we have to, it's a hard balance, because I don't want us to give up the mantle of ethics, tzedek, moral high ground, standing up for something, and at the same time want to be sensitive to the fact that we have a diverse community, and balancing those things can be hard and can frankly lead to frustrations on both sides. And I will oftentimes hear critique from both sides on issues that wish that we'd be more out there, or wish that we would have held back more.
I know in the last, I think it was about a year or so ago, that Ramah made some headlines in general in terms of in the Jewish papers about Israel, and that conversation with some younger staff members and university students really wanting to expand the conversation versus others wanting to make sure Ramah remains a place that is supportive of a Jewish state and a Jewish homeland. How do you balance conversations like that and deciding where the boundaries are when it comes to perspectives in the Jewish world?
I'll be honest, and I know this is being shared publicly, I actually think that we balanced it for a few years by putting our heads in the sand. I think that, I'll just speak for me as the executive director, and I think there were a few years where we did say, oh no, don't do that, that's too far to the right, and don't do that, that's too far to the left. But in terms of really holding the reins of Israel education and defining what are our goals for 8 to 11-year-olds, and what kinds of, a little bit of complexity without ever losing the love, of an Israel should a 12 to 14-year-old, and then what kinds of conversations should 16-year-olds have before they're going to go to Israel when they're 17. And we weren't thinking as intentional, vision-oriented educators, because we were afraid of the backlash from the right, and we were afraid of the backlash from the left. And so, we have been more gradually grabbing those reins and starting to define, what some of those educational goals are. Do I think that it will ultimately satisfy some of the people that are pushing from the left and want, Ramah to take an anti-occupation approach and, make sure that every speaker from the center right has an equal balance from the center left? I don't think they're going to be totally satisfied. And similarly, there are people on the right that were not happy that we had 2 speakers last summer from an organization called Roots Shorashim come in for Shabbat at Camp Ramah in California, and it included a right-wing Orthodox rabbi settler and his good friend, who is a Muslim Palestinian who lives in a village close by in the West Bank. And so nobody's happy with that, right? The right's upset. How could Camp Ramah have a Palestinian as a Shabbat guest? And then the people on the left are like, how can you normalize, the perspective of a right-wing settler? And what we were able to show was love, respect, dialogue, not agreement. And I think that, amidst all of the icky infighting in the Jewish world about Israel politics, the fact that we were able to bring this, loving, warm Orthodox rabbi and this, respectful and caring and kind, Palestinian Muslim to display for us how to have respectful dialogue without agreement was, I actually think, a very important part of us taking the reins. So, I think it's gradual. I think it's unfortunate that sometimes the headlines take over and prevent us from being able to be the educators that we want to be. But I'm glad that we're moving beyond where our heads were in the sand, and we were just kind of letting whatever happen.
I think that's incredible. It's that conversation and that dialogue between disagreeing viewpoints that seems to just being falling out in the world and unable to take place. And it's great that Ramah can be a place where that's allowed to happen. You mentioned just very briefly in there, you're talking about a Shabbat, and Shabbat at camp's always been such a special thing. And we try to do youth programming. I always hear from my congregants, you got to make it more like Camp Shabbat. That's how you get the teens in. You got to make it more like Shabbat at camp. What is it about Shabbat at camp that is just so special? Why is it seems to not be able to be recreated anywhere else?
I know. You can't have Havdalah without the lake. We don't have a lake in California. I know all of the camps there have lakes.
A water slide's not bad, though.
I appreciate that. That's good. Look, we hear this, and certainly, I thought when I was a shul rabbi, I'd be able to just snap and recreate some of my camp magic and history from Ojai from some years before. And it doesn't work like that. I do think that, some of it is at camp, the fact that you have the previous 6 days. Shabbat comes as a true day of connection and rest after an exhausting, fast-paced, 24/6 experience for everyone in the community. And then the other piece is, I think it's who they're celebrating with, that their focus is on their peers and their madrichim and their counselors, and so I think that peer experience is hard to recreate. So I don't have a simple template to say, here, Louis, take this to your shul and it'll work, because I do think that people are right in saying that's the kind of spirit we want to recreate, but it's hard to do so.
Are there any parts of camp that you think we could recreate in the world? Not to recreate, but values, ideas, things from camp that we should bring beyond just the the summer and the Machane bring to our other Jewish institutions?
I would say joy. I think that kids can, it's interesting. My kids will, I won't watch too closely. I don't know if they're standing behind me, so I have to be careful. But my kids during the year will have the same kind of look in shul that most kids have. But then you get them here at camp with their peers. There's something that's just, they're different, right? And so I think one is joy. And another piece that I would say is a takeaway, I think it's how we treat teens. That I think that oftentimes in the Jewish world, the teen Jewish experience is a little bit infantilizing. It's a little bit kind of just us providing stuff for them. And they're pretty sophisticated. They're pretty worldly. And I think that they rise to the challenge, the leadership, the challenge of social justice, the challenge of, creativity, but actually giving them real resources and say so for what that is in a framework that we think is going to help them grow and learn. But I think sometimes in the Jewish world, we don't honor their sophistication. And so we end up, treating 16 and 17-year-olds like they're 13 or 14-year-olds.
One of the things my synagogue is doing now is going through a process of becoming egalitarian. It's been a few years now that we fully counted women in minyan and allowed them equal access to all ritual acts. And I know that as I've been to other Ramahs, that every camp seems to be at kind of a different level along that spectrum in terms of observance of female staff and female campers. What has that been like in California, that process of bringing women kind of into the fold, so to speak, or of just that whole conversation, whether or not women should be required to wear tefillin or not, whether or not all of that?
Some of it happened way before me, right? I'm not sure at what point Camp Ramah in California became egalitarian and that women were counted and permitted to read Torah and be a shlichat tzibur. Certainly decades, several decades at least. And I think it reflected some of the larger urban synagogues and where they were making those transitions, probably in the 70s, maybe into the early 80s. And so it's the West Coast, it's California. What I think is interesting, and I'm very cognizant of the fact that I'm a male rabbi, I'm speaking to a male rabbi, that some of the rituals that come along with that, not the leadership roles. We see women that will, my wife's a better Torah reader than I am, and she's not a rabbi. And we see women that will, perform the ritual leadership roles equally with men here. But some of the ritual garb that has, traditionally come along with men's roles in tefillot of talit and tefillin, while we have never required that for women, it's also never really taken hold for the post-bat mitzvah girls and women who are on staff here at camp. And so we'll have a small handful, maybe there are a minyan out of the 500 girls and women that are here at camp at any given time that are putting on tefillin, but it's not something that's really taken hold. And I think it's a larger conversation, for and I feel weird having it, right, and saying I would like to be at the table with a lot of women having the conversation and to hear what they think about these rituals that have been a key part of how men historically have used tefillot to connect to self, to the world, to God. And I don't know why those haven't worked yet for women.
Great. And that's actually, it's very interesting the way you phrase that, because that's something we're very conscious about at our synagogue, as we are two male rabbis having this discussion here in Ontario and trying to bring other voices to that table as we're looking to really make the full switch and embrace our new identity. The final question I want to ask you, and it's what I've been asking every rabbi that's been on, just is there any piece of Torah, it doesn't have to be related to COVID, related to what's going on in the world right now, just a piece of Torah that really has spoken to you for a significant period of time that you'd like to share with us? Any, be on anything.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Love that invitation. I have Masachet Brachot right here, ready. I was anticipating the question. It's a piece of Torah that has always stuck with me and been very moving. And I do think it actually applies right now, less so, frankly, about COVID to some degree. I guess it could still apply. And certainly with everything going on in the world, and especially in the United States right now, with the protests, the fight for equality and racial justice. So there's an interesting sugya section of the Talmud, and toward the beginning of Masachet Brachot, the tractate of Brachot, that talks about when bad things happen, what do you do? And so there are a few first attempts of the Talmud that, you look at, your actions, and is there something that you can do better to prevent those bad things from happening? And then if that's really not working, maybe there's a theological construct for why there are bad things happening in your life. And that could be true for an individual, and then it goes through for all of the children of Israel, and then it gets to this little closing scenario. And I get my reading glasses. I'd like to share this with you, and it's a very powerful little piece that Rabbi Chia bar Abba chalash al gabe Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Chia bar Abba, was sick, and Rabbi Yochanan came to visit him. And Rabbi Yochanan says, "Ar lechavivin alecha yisurin." So are the afflictions, like this person was really sick, and he says, are they dear to you? Because maybe it's that theological construct, right? That God loves you, and that's why you're suffering right now. And then the answer is, lo hen v'lo sachran. No, not them, and not their reward, right? And so it's not the theological construct. I'm just sick, and this really is not good. And so what does Rabbi Yochanan say in response? Sorry, Rabbi Yochanan. So Amarle lo milo sachran, Amarle ha yadech yehev la yadeh va'okme. He says, give me your hand. He touches him, and then he lifts him. Unclear whether this is a magical healing or he just lifts him in bed. So in this moment where they could be having this grand theological discussion with the famous rabbi of why he's sick, he doesn't say a word. He reaches out and touches, and he helps lift him up in bed. And then Rabbi Yochanan himself, Rabbi Yochanan chalash, al legabe Rabbi Chanina. So Rabbi Yochanan now is sick, and Rabbi Chanina comes to visit him. Same scenario. Amar lechavivin alecha yisurim. Asks him, are these, sufferings dear to you? Amar le, Rabbi Yochanan says, no, not at all. Lo hen v'lo sachran. Not them, not their reward. I'm not interested in any theological answer, Rabbi, right now. So what does Rabbi Chanina say? Amar le, havli yadech. Give me your hand. Yehev la yadeh. He gives him his hand. V'okme. So now Rabbi Yochanan, who had been the healer the first time, is now the one that's in bed having this experience. And then the Talmud asks, Amai lokim Rabbi Yochanan lefshe. So if Rabbi Yochanan was the one who was able to do the miraculous healing, why can't he just heal himself? Why does he need someone else to come and heal him in that moment? Amre, and they give the answer, Ein chavush matir atzmo mi beit ha'asurim. That one who is imprisoned cannot free themselves from the jail. And I think in a time, where we're actually not permitted to touch each other because of COVID. And we see people that are struggling so in the world around us because of COVID and because of the riots, or losing their business because of the riots, and people that are stepping forward to protest, for a just cause. What we see here is the capacity, for us to connect with one another, the need for us to connect with one another, and that idea that everyone needs a hand up. And so for me in this time, that we are sort of forced to be in our own bubble, this page of Talmud reminds me, Rabbi, maybe it's not your words that I'm supposed to use right now, but to try and be present and to support others through these difficult times.
That's great. It's a beautiful piece, and sometimes that helping hand, that hand to lift you up, goes so much further than anything we can ever say.
Mm-hmm.
It really reminds me in a way of what I always loved about the ropes course at camp, and I always talked about it being a microcosm of what camp was in general. It was a safe place that you could try something, and if you fell, you knew someone was going to catch you, someone was going to lift you up, and it was very literal at the ropes course. But it really captured what I always felt like as a kid at summer camp, which was that I could try anything, things that I wasn't traditionally good at. I traditionally have a lot of experience in, from public speaking to sports to sing, anything I wanted. And I knew that if I messed up, there was going to be someone there supporting me, someone to reach out their hand and pick me back up. And it's one of the things I love about camp. And really, thank you so much, Rabbi. It's such a pleasure to have you with us and to share some of your words with our community. And thank you to everyone for tuning in and watching.
If you don't love your neighbor, if you gossip about him, if you never have mercy, if he gets in